Thank you. After 7 years of Barack Obama, we are not waiting any longer to take our country back.
Next up, New Hampshire, after Iowa voters make their choices known.
A big surprise for caucus goers inside this Catholic church. I'm Jason Calvi. I'll have that story coming up.
Vote to override. Congressional Republicans push for Obamacare repeal and Planned Parenthood defunding. And do not fear China's growing power. Pope Francis calls for true balance of peace realized through dialogue. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, February 2nd, 2016. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick, and Hillary Clinton ekes out a win in Iowa as a victorious Ted Cruz and a buoyant Marco Rubio enter next week's New Hampshire primary on a roll. Rubio is within striking distance of Donald Trump, who took second place in Monday's Iowa Republican caucuses. Jason Calvi in Des Moines and Lauren Ashburn here in Washington continue our Road to the White House team coverage.
Brian, the Iowa caucuses didn't disappoint in the drama department last night. It wasn't until this morning we knew that Hillary Clinton beat Bernie Sanders. And few predicted Donald Trump would lose. On the Republican side, 180,000 voters caucused, and that's 60,000 more people than showed up last election. They thought that the larger, newer voter turnout was expected to be good for Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, but it wasn't. Both lost. Iowa voters handed Ted Cruz a clear victory in last night's caucuses.
Tonight is a victory for courageous conservatives across Iowa and all across this great nation.
The Texas senator earned 28% of the vote, while Donald Trump came in second with 24%. Trump opened his concession speech praising Iowa, saying he might just buy a farm there.
We finished second, and I want to tell you something. I'm just honored.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio barely missed second place, coming in third at 23%, sending him off with a shot of momentum.
The people of this great state have sent a very clear message. After 7 years of Barack Obama, we are not waiting any longer to take our country back.
The Democrats delivered a dead heat, only a few votes between them. Hillary Clinton's team called the race for her, but in the early morning hours, the Bernie Sanders defeat was just too close to call.
I stand here tonight breathing a big sigh of relief. Thank you, Iowa.
For folks who did not think Bernie Sanders could win, that we could compete against Hillary Clinton, I hope that that thought is now gone.
Iowa's results proved too much for Democrat Martin O'Malley. He folded up shop after garnering 1% of the vote. On the Republican side, Mike Huckabee bowed out with humor.
Obviously, the voters are sick of me, and I need to acknowledge that.
Now the candidates look ahead to next week's New Hampshire primary. So how will the caucus shape next Tuesday's matchup? Will momentum for Cruz and Rubio carry into New Hampshire? And what about Donald Trump's second place finish? The Des Moines Register poll had Trump at 28% going into the caucuses. Capitol Hill reporter Jason Calvi is in snowy Iowa. You interviewed Trump last night before the vote, Jason.
Yeah, Lauren, you know, snow is the story now here in Iowa. The campaign ads are off the air. The candidates have all moved on to New Hampshire. But in his last campaign stop in Iowa, Donald Trump said he was going to have a tremendous victory yesterday. He did receive 45,000 votes, but it wasn't enough. We did see the man before his fall.
Father, how are you? I'm very well. Welcome to St. Francis Parish.
Candidate Carly Fiorina chose this Catholic church to make a last push for votes.
Hope your mom will call them for me. Great job.
Thank you.
And then she was trumped. Of all the caucus sites across the state, the frontrunner chose to visit this one. Mr. Trump, what's it like to be back at church again?
I love it. I love this crowd. It's a big crowd.
Good luck.
It's going to be hopefully great.
What's your thoughts going in tonight?
I think we're going to do well, but who knows? We're going to have to see. It's called politics.
You know your competitors here tonight as well. Do you know that going into
Who's
this?
that?
Carly.
Nice woman.
At every caucus location, one supporter of each candidate can speak.
You know that you cannot wait to see me debate Hillary Clinton.
The Trump effect has been felt all over the state. But despite his high poll numbers heading into the night, his star power couldn't pull him past Ted Cruz. And even Trump's visit to St. Francis didn't help him win this caucus site.
So I'm not going to be told.
Where Senator Rubio took 36%, Senator Ted Cruz 21%, and Donald Trump 20%.
Amen.
And Fiorina earned just 40 votes.
We're going to make America great again. And thank you all very much. I love you. I love you. Thank you.
And the entrance polls reveal that the newcomers supported Rubio and Cruz, not Trump as expected. Now, Trump did tweet out today, I want to read it to you. He said it was a great finish in Iowa. He called it a long shot great finish in Iowa. Lauren?
Long shot, great finish. All right. Well, what do you know about Trump's plan for New Hampshire coming up?
Well, some close supporters of Trump say they really need to focus on the ground game in New Hampshire. They need to pick up the phone and make sure they call people throughout the state to encourage them to support Trump.
And the polls, what are they saying for the next stop?
Sure. Well, the Real Clear Politics average of the polls has Trump with a commanding lead, 33%. Ted Cruz in a distant second place with 11%. But as we know from Iowa, the polls aren't always right.
Okay, Jason Calvi in Iowa, come on home. You've done a great job. We'll talk to you soon. And Melinda Henneberger is editor-in-chief at Roll Call. She is here joining us to do some analysis. What are your thoughts on Trump's second place finish?
Well, I thought he almost seemed relieved. There are these moments when you wonder how much even Donald Trump wants Donald Trump to become president. and last night he had some rare moments of generosity of spirit.
I was surprised by that too.
And was not at all making excuses. He seemed, I thought, a little bit relieved.
I know. Well, I thought, where's Donald Trump as we know him, right?
And that sentiment was widely shared, especially among establishment Republicans who were very, very relieved to see Marco Rubio do so well, and to see, in general, too, I think a lot of the evangelical voters who supported Ted Cruz in numbers that weren't quite expected.
True.
There was this sense that, okay, natural order has returned to the universe.
We're back on gravity. We're back on Earth
now. The
now.
laws of gravity do apply even to Donald Trump, whereas for a while it looked like, in what universe does a candidate who can't correctly cite a scripture, any verse from scripture, do very well with evangelicals, as the polls supposed that he would, but that's not what happened.
What do you think about Hillary's tiny, tiny win over Bernie Sanders? Was it going to make a difference?
I don't think. Well, I think it's huge that he came so close to her. I mean, when someone who is not actually a member of the Democratic Party, who is a socialist, who is not someone you think of as young, new, and exciting,
and who captures the young vote,
and has this kind of, uprising really on his behalf, and also without really spending time raising money. I mean, he was bragging last night correctly that his average donation is $27. So when a guy like that so changes Hillary Clinton that she's up there sort of channeling Bernie Sanders. I mean, it seemed almost like she was feeling the burn. She's screaming. She's the woman of the people.
Okay. Well, Melinda Henneberg, editor of Roll Call, thank you so much for joining us. Now we go back to Iowa, where one Catholic radio host following the campaign gives his perspective on Marco Rubio. Deacon Mike Mano joins us from Des Moines. He's the host of Iowa Catholic Radio's Faith on Trial show. He's also a lawyer and an adjunct professor of political science at Upper Iowa University, and he is a Marco Rubio caucuser. Were you surprised by how well he did?
No, not really. I could kind of feel that he was doing better than he was predicted to do.
And why is that?
I think it's because we had the electorate was angry, and I think they were going, if you look at the top candidates, they were going with the outsiders, the politically incorrect ones. But I think Marco put a different spin on things. He put a happier face on the message that he was delivering, more like a Ronald Reagan did.
Or, as we were talking about earlier, a JFK. Do you think that his Catholicism had something to do with it?
I think it may have, but probably not as much as you might want to give deference to. I think there was a lot of conservative Christians that were wanting to vote against the establishment. And I think he was the one that had the, like I say, the best face on it, the best smile.
Well, Ted Cruz did win, and he continues to talk about his conservative values and has been talking about his being a Christian. And it seemed to me that if the Catholic and also the evangelical vote really showed up for him.
It did, and it also showed up for Trump. The internals of the latest Des Moines Register poll showed a lot of the Catholic vote going to Trump.
That's surprising, especially because on the national level, we're seeing that so many people in the Catholic community have been saying that they're not quite sure that Trump is the person. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Deacon Mike. We appreciate it and hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
More political coverage a little later. Meanwhile, other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. President Obama brings Republican congressional leaders to the White House today. Obama's meeting with Paul Ryan was his first since the Wisconsin Republican was elected House Speaker more than 3 months ago. A feisty Ryan told reporters before that White House meeting that the start of the voting in Iowa means, quote, the days of Barack Obama's presidency are numbered. House Republicans make their latest push to dismantle Obamacare and defund Planned Parenthood. Representatives voting today in an attempt to override that presidential veto. Wyatt Goolsby reports from Capitol Hill.
Brian, it's clear Republicans here in Congress do not have the two-thirds majority they need to reverse President Obama's veto. But House Speaker Paul Ryan says regardless of the outcome, today's vote proves a point that the GOP could repeal Obamacare if they had a Republican in the White House. Last month, Congress passed the bill, which guts much of the health care law and ends federal payments to Planned Parenthood. Ryan says Republicans want change.
We're angry that we have a porous border. We're angry that people aren't getting raises. We're angry that we've had 2% something growth for 10 years. We're angry that a debt crisis is on the horizon and we've done nothing to fix it because of a progressive president. So yeah, we're angry, but the key here is take that anger and channel it constructively into action.
Today, White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest challenged Speaker Ryan, saying he has not seen a fully fleshed out Republican alternative to the health care law.
But I think Republicans would certainly have a stronger case to make to the American electorate that they should be able to retain the majority if they can actually point to something that they've done in the last year.
Democrats mock the GOP for trying yet again to kill or curb the health care law. They say this is the 62nd time Republicans have tried to do so since they took control of the House in 2011. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsby on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Wyatt. The Obama administration proposes quadrupling what America spends on its troops and training in Europe. This is part of the U.S. military's accelerating effort to deter Russia. Defense Secretary Ash Carter describes Russia as a growing challenge for the United States. He says the U.S. is taking a strong and balanced approach to deterring its former Cold War foe. The president is also calling for a 50% increase in spending on the war against ISIS to $7.5 billion. Secretary of State John Kerry warns against ISIS gaining control of Libya's oil revenue. He tells leaders of 23 nations meeting in Rome the terrorists must be stopped.
We are complicating Daesh's efforts to recruit foreign fighters, to be able to plan attacks, to move personnel.
Kerry says the fight against ISIS is a long-term proposition similar to the battle with al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. Pope Francis making international headlines today. He gives his first interview about China to a Hong Kong newspaper. Mary Shovlin has more from Rome tonight.
Brian, Pope Francis granted an hour-long interview to Chinese journalist Francesco Sisci on January 28th here in the Vatican. The article was just made public today around the world. The two were not afraid to touch on very sensitive topics such as China's rapid growth, the strain that can put on family life, but also the controversial one-child policy, which was, of course, recently amended to become a two-child policy. But Pope Francis began his answers by expressing his great esteem and respect for the Chinese people and its culture. At the end of the interview, he also became the first pope ever to extend to the president and to the people of China wishes for a happy new year. The Chinese New Year begins on February 8th. Brian?
Thanks, Mary. Here in the States, Kentucky orders Planned Parenthood to stop performing abortions at its Louisville office. Governor Matt Bevin says Planned Parenthood is, quote, knowingly operating an unlicensed abortion facility in clear violation of the law. The state says the abortion provider must have an agreement with a nearby hospital in case women suffer complications. Margie Montgomery, Executive Director of Right to Life of Louisville, joining us by Skype from Frankfort, Kentucky's capital. Margie, can Kentucky make this stick, or is this just a temporary delay?
I think it's pretty temporary. I know they're working hard on it, going into effect right away, but I think it's just a temporary one.
Do you think Kentucky's abortion laws are any more strict than in other states?
I think they're pretty strict in our state. We've always been one of the strongest with pro-life legislation passed.
What else are you doing there in Kentucky with Right to Life of Louisville to try to stop abortions in the Louisville metro area?
Well, we always have lots of events going on throughout the year, many pro-life activities. We have an annual Celebration of Life banquet, and we have other laws that have been passed by Metro Council and our state legislators. We also have many federal legislators that are on our side. We've been very well known about this.
Would you say that the pro-life movement is alive and well in the Louisville area?
Absolutely. They're very active people. We have an active Students for Life group. Our meetings that we're going to all the time, and I think that bodes well for us. We send buses to the annual March for Life, and we have a Rally for Life at our state capitol every year, one coming up on February 11th.
And what drew you into the pro-life movement, Margie?
I have been involved in it for about 44 years, and we've still got a lot of good people very much with us and do volunteer work at our office.
Well, you're one of the original pro-life troopers, Margie Montgomery with Right to Life of Louisville. Thanks for joining us from Frankfort by Skype, Margie.
Thank you.
And Americans won't have to cross the border for a papal blessing during the Pope's visit to Juarez, Mexico in 2 weeks. We're told the Pope will extend his blessing to people watching the Mass on giant video screens at the Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas. That event could draw as many as 50,000 people. Coming up, a grieving Virginia mother shares her sorrow over the death of her 13-year-old daughter, and using social media for instant feedback from the Iowa caucuses. Today, February 2nd, we celebrate the presentation of Jesus, also known as Candlemas Day. Thanks for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. The mother of a murdered teen speaks out for the first time since her 13-year-old daughter disappeared. Nicole Lovell's body was found near the Virginia-North Carolina state line Saturday.
Nicole was a very lovable person. Nicole touched many people throughout her short life.
The prosecutor just revealed Lovell was stabbed to death the same day she left home. 2 Virginia Tech students are in custody. David Eisenhower is charged with murder. Natalie Keepers is now charged with being an accessory to murder. Federal prosecutors say the FBI is now in on the investigation of lead contamination of Flint, Michigan's water. The Associated Press reports the Justice Department, the Postal Inspection Service, and the EPA are also involved. Flint switched its water source from Detroit's water system to the Flint River in 2014 to save money. Officials say the river water wasn't treated properly and lead from pipes leached into homes. The Zika virus is not just spread by mosquitoes, we're now learning. The health department in Dallas just reported its first case of Zika spread through sexual transmission. The World Health Organization calls the Zika virus a global health emergency. Back now to political director Lauren Ashburn with continuing coverage of the road to the White House.
You know, Brian, as Iowa caucus results came in last night, so did the tweets. And Catherine Zeltner gives us a look into the influential and controversial Twittersphere.
Yes, Lauren, the microblogging tool exploded onto the political scene in the last presidential election, and its influence has grown. Presidential candidate Donald Trump claims he hardly spent money on ads, instead relying on media attention he received from his heated tweets. Media outlets outside Twitter used Trump's second-place Iowa finish as a chance to pick on the man who's built his brand on winning. Here's a cover of this morning's New York Daily News with the title, "Dead Clown Walking." And CNN's media analysts notice this. Who made Fox's official announcement about Ted Cruz beating New York businessman Donald Trump? The one, the only, Megyn Kelly. This is a jab at Trump's absence from last week's GOP debate. He didn't show because he thought Fox moderator Megyn Kelly was biased. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee let the world know he was pulling out. "I am officially suspending my campaign. Thank you all for your loyal support. Hashtag I'm with Huck." Scores of media prognosticators tried their best to predict the future. Washington Post writer Greg Sargent Today's media coverage summarized. Number 1, if it's Hillary, tight win equals weakness, revealing loss. Number 2, if it's Rubio, third is the new first. But one tweet that got a lot of circulation is an old one from Donald Trump in December 2013. In a twist of irony, Trump tweeted a quote from Walter Hagen, "No one remembers who came in second." Many were closely monitoring Trump's Twitter feed today to see how the presidential candidate would react to his Iowa loss. In a series of 5 tweets, Trump claims he spent very little money in Iowa, blames media coverage, and says he hasn't been given enough credit for funding his own campaign. Lauren.
There were a lot of funny tweets last night. Both of us were on Twitter. What do you think the funniest one was?
There was a lot made from a press release coming from Ben Carson's camp saying the presidential candidate, he's leaving Iowa early to go home and get clean clothes. There was one tweet from a reporter saying Ben Carson left Iowa to go home and get clean clothes. He has not heard of dry cleaners or laundromats.
It was the strangest tweet, I think, of the night, or political of the night.
It was, but I guess we all, you know,
need a rest, right? Okay. Well, political pundits are always on Twitter breaking down the data, even in 140 characters. Earlier today, we talked to a political scientist about Iowa's religious demographics and its impact on last night's results. David Cochran is a politics professor at Loras College. He joins us from Dubuque, Iowa. He's also the author of 5 books, including The Catholic Vote, a guide for the perplexed. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And you also caucused last night, but we'll get to that in just 1 minute. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the religious landscape of Iowa and how it impacts caucuses, especially when it comes to Catholics?
Sure. Iowa looks a lot like the rest of the country when it comes to the percentage of religious groups. Catholics are a little underrepresented, evangelical Protestants a little overrepresented. Catholics tend to break down the middle, Democrat, Republican, the way they do nationwide. But evangelical, especially white evangelicals, are strongly Republican, which influences the caucuses.
Sure. The Catholic Church does not endorse candidates. And I'm wondering if you were seeing a trend in Iowa.
Not especially. The Catholics tend to be concentrated on the eastern side of the state, which tend to be more moderate. It splits between Democrats and Republicans the same way as the rest of the country. So there isn't any large trends with Catholics compared to Protestants.
Right, and I understand that Iowa does not take a poll or doesn't put together those numbers until the general. But I do have to ask you right before we go, thank you for joining us, but what was it like caucusing at Happy's Place last night?
It was fantastic. There's no better place to attend the Iowa caucuses than a neighborhood bar. So it was a great feeling of democracy and neighborly
camaraderie,
debate.
right? Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us, David Cochran.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Up next, Padre Pio's example links confession with mercy. And Punxsutawney Phil makes his annual prediction. Is spring just around the corner? The stock market slide continues today with the Dow plunging 295 points. Analysts blaming slow global growth and weak oil prices. Thanks for joining us on Tuesday evening, February 2nd. The remains of 2 saints known as examples of mercy come to Rome this week. Urns containing the relics of Padre Pio and St. Leopoldo Mandic arrive tomorrow. Pope Francis, of course, stresses the direct link between mercy and confession.
For the Holy Year of Mercy, he wants to promote really strongly the sacrament of reconciliation, and both of them have been the saints of the confessional, and their whole life was dedicated to this sacrament of reconciliation.
The Holy Father officially commissions missionaries of mercy on Ash Wednesday. Well, this is Groundhog Day, and the world's most famous groundhog has a promising forecast.
There is no shadow to be cast. An early spring is my forecast.
According to tradition, if Punxsutawney Phil doesn't see his shadow in western Pennsylvania, we'll have an early spring. The Weather Service says he's wrong most of the time. Consider the source. Until tomorrow, we appreciate you being with us. I'm Brian Patrick for the EWTN News Nightly team. Good night.